Today we'll begin our study of Chapter 3, the defects of samsara. This common preliminary practice is also very important. I hope you will listen attentively to my teachings, diligently attend the tutoring sessions given by others, preview the text, and meditate accordingly. On the surface, the preliminary practices, such as the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages, the impermanence of life, and the defects of samsara, may seem straightforward in their literal meanings. But when you really put these into practice, you will find they are even more challenging than other advanced practices. For instance, when you practice channels, energies, and essences, visualize deities, and recite mantras, it is relatively easy to maintain concentration. However, when many of you first undertake the preliminary practices, you may struggle to get started, calm your mind, and remain in a state conducive to the practice. This is because the scope of preliminary practices is quite extensive and their content is profound. Additionally, our habitual tendency to engage with authentic Dharma is often weak. Nevertheless, we must not give up halfway while practicing the preliminaries. Otherwise, if these practices are not successfully completed, it will be very difficult for most people, except for a few practitioners with sharp faculties, to achieve success in other practices. That is why I have intentionally scheduled more teaching sessions for this text. Some may think it is too long, quite unnecessary. However, after careful consideration, I believe that if you invest more time in the common preliminary practices, it will enhance your practice of the uncommon preliminaries. Then, if you also commit yourselves to the uncommon preliminaries, you should not encounter any difficulties with future practices. Even if you do not pursue any further practices, as long as you succeed in the preliminaries, there will be nothing to regret. Many beginning practitioners may not yet fully grasp the importance of practicing ngondro. However, by following the guidance and practicing diligently throughout your life, you will undoubtedly come to appreciate its value in your later years. It is because I have practiced the common and uncommon preliminaries so well that I am now a great practitioner. Had I started with the pinnacle of Dharma practices, I would not be the person I am today. For all these reasons, I have decided to provide extensive teachings on the words of my perfect teacher. Before each chapter, Patro Rinpoche would praise his guru, Jigme Gyaltsen Nyugu, with a prayer. Knowing fully that all things in samsara are empty of substance, you pursue with great compassion the only goal of benefiting sentient beings. Unattached to samsara or nirvana, you embrace the teachings of the great vehicle. Peerless Guru, at your feet I bow. Knowing fully that all things in samsara are empty of substance, Patro Rinpoche's guru fully understood that everything in samsara is ultimately meaningless. What do all things in samsara entail? To worldly people, these things include defeating enemies, protecting family and friends, making money, building a career, and so forth. To spiritual practitioners, they involve actions such as meditating or performing recitations with the aim of being reborn in a higher realm. However, such activities cannot free us from samsara. Therefore, they lack true meaning. You pursue with great compassion the only goal of benefiting sentient beings. His guru strived solely for the benefit of all sentient beings, with Mahayana compassion. As reflected in the biography of Jigme Gyaltsen Nyugu, from his youth until his parinirvana, he dedicated his life to the benefit of others. He consistently prioritized activities that helped sentient beings, showing no concern for personal sacrifice or effort. Unattached to samsara or nirvana, you embrace the teachings of the great vehicle. With wisdom, his guru remained unattached to samsara, and with compassion, he was not attached to nirvana. He practiced the 6 paramitas in accordance with the great vehicle. Peerless Guru, at your feet I bow. At the feet of his peerless guru, Patrul Rinpoche bows with deep respect, praying for his guru's blessings, so he can soon generate renunciation toward samsara and attain the fruition beyond life and death. Choktrul Rinpoche, a disciple of Khenpo Nawang Pelzang, suggested that when practicing ngondro, one must first recite this prayer, then close one's eyes, put palms together, and pray earnestly. May my root guru and all lineage masters, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas grant me blessings so I can soon generate the conviction that samsara is devoid of meaning and give rise to a genuine renunciation that sees through the illusions of the world. After the prayer, one may proceed to meditation. There is also a prayer to the Guru at the beginning of Chapter 2, the impermanence of life. Therefore, when practicing each of the common preliminaries, you should first recite the corresponding prayer and then practice with focused intent. By doing so, you will receive extraordinary blessings. Personally, I believe the blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are very important. Without sincere prayer, their blessings may not penetrate us, making it impossible to awaken the wisdom in our mind stream. Although Buddhas and Bodhisattvas impartially care for all beings with great compassion, it is still essential for us to have faith as the cause and condition to receive their blessings. Otherwise, boundless blessings will not enter our minds without reason. Thus, during our daily practice, we must pray to the Guru, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. Many scholars emphasize only the theoretical aspects of the Dharma and neglect the significance of faith. This is, without a doubt, a deficiency. Therefore, we should integrate theory with genuine practice, thereby incorporating the blessings of the lineage gurus into our minds. Once the blessings have truly merged into our minds, we will become mentally stronger. We will not develop erroneous views, and our practice will become efficient and effective. The sufferings of samsara in general. As mentioned earlier, although we have obtained the precious human life with the freedoms and advantages, it will not last forever. Ultimately, it will lead to death without a doubt. Here, Patrul Rinpoche summarizes the content of the first two chapters. As discussed in Chapter 1, now that we have this rare and valuable human existence, we must genuinely appreciate it and use it to diligently practice the Dharma. As discussed in Chapter 2, if we were to live for an extended period, it might have been acceptable to delay our practice. However, this human life is as impermanent and illusory as a bubble or a mirage, and it will inevitably end in death. Therefore, before we lose this precious human life, we must seize the opportunity to practice. As you should know, if a person wants to transcend samsara, they must cut off attachment to this life and future lives. However, many people struggle to let go of fame, wealth, and status in this life. As Lama Tsongkhapa stated, if we effectively practice the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages and the impermanence of life, we can certainly uproot attachment to this life. If we wish to further uproot attachment to future lives, we must practice the defects of samsara and the principle of cause and effect. Many people lack the intention to uproot their attachments to this life and future lives. Many practitioners I have met want to meditate effectively and study the Dharma thoroughly, but when asked about their underlying motivation, they often respond with aspirations for happiness in future lives, avoiding a lower rebirth, attaining heaven, similar to believers of other religions, or enjoying pleasures in the Pure Land. What a pity! You are not a true practitioner if you never contemplate liberation from samsara, but only seek happiness and health in this life, or enjoyment in the celestial realms of future lives. Therefore, please prioritize liberation from samsara above all else. During your practice, you should ask yourself, am I practicing ngondro for this life or for a future life? If it is for future lives, is it for happiness in the upper realms or for ultimate liberation from samsara? This is a crucial question. We must pray for the blessings of the Guru and the three jewels, so that we lose interest in happiness in the good realms and desire only to be freed from the fire pit like three worlds. The Sutra of Explaining Karmas states that suffering in the three types of existence is as horrifying as poisons, wild beasts, and savages. The sutra asserts that there is nothing in samsara worth clinging to, so we must make every effort to free ourselves from it. While many can discuss being freed from the three worlds or being liberated from the six realms, it is essential to reflect carefully on what your true practice goal is. As mentioned in the text, the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages motivates us to practice, and the impermanence of life urges us to practice as soon as possible. So what is the purpose of the next preliminary practice? If, after death, we were to end like an extinguished lamp or dried up water, there would be nothing more to say. However, death does not signify a complete end. Rebirth is inevitable. With rebirth, one is bound to the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, death is not nothingness, as proposed by atheists and materialists. If that were the case, then our efforts spent preparing for future lives would be entirely futile. In fact, death is not the ultimate end. We are destined to be reborn and remain in samsara, the unceasing cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Thus, we must understand the defects of samsara. It is crucial to make an effort to cultivate conviction about rebirth. Otherwise, many people will remain skeptical. Believing in rebirth may not be an issue for Tibetans who have received such education since childhood. As some masters have commented, Tibetans have always been vessels of Mahayana Buddhism, growing up in an environment saturated with Buddhism, which leads to little doubt about rebirth. In contrast, other ethnic groups around the world differ from Tibetans. Due to the materialistic values they absorb from a young age, they regard rebirth as superstition. Even if they occasionally encounter the Dharma and begin to practice as they grow up, they remain skeptical about rebirth and are not fully convinced of the existence of the God realms and hells. Regarding this issue, those who have not yet accepted the concept of rebirth must begin with theoretical analysis. They should not feel compelled to accept it blindly, simply because this was said by Buddha Shakyamuni, so I must accept it. Instead, they should conduct a thorough and careful analysis, striving to accept it through rational exploration. The concept of rebirth exists in major religions. For example, the Rig Veda, the oldest canonical text of Hinduism, indicates that after a person dies, the soul will go somewhere. The Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, the later scriptures of Hinduism, provide clearer and more in-depth discussions on rebirth. In the West, ancient Greek philosophers also explored the idea of a soul. For instance, Plato believed that a person would be reborn based on the virtuous and vicious actions of their previous life. Before Buddhism was introduced, ancient Chinese primarily adhered to Confucianism and Taoism. Confucius, the founder of Confucianism, said, "If we do not understand life, how can we understand death?" He also stated, "Respect ghosts and gods, yet keep them at a distance." It seems that Confucius acknowledged the existence of rebirth, gods, and ghosts, but he chose to avoid discussing them and maintained a respectful distance. Confucius neither confirmed their existence nor denied it. Some materialists also adopt this agnostic attitude toward rebirth. From the personal experience of Wang Yangming, 1472 to 1529, a renowned Neo-Confucian philosopher of the Ming Dynasty, it seems that Confucianism acknowledges the continuity of lives. When Wang Yangming was 50 years old, he visited the Jinshan Temple in Jiangsu Province and experienced a sense of déjà vu. He walked around the temple with a monk until they came to a closed and sealed retreat cabin. Feeling as though he had once lived in the cabin, Wang Yangming could not restrain his curiosity and implored the monk to open it. The monk immediately refused, saying, "This cabin is where one of our old monks passed into parinirvana 50 years ago. His body is enshrined inside. According to his will, nobody is allowed to open the cabin. Please forgive me, but this cabin cannot be opened." However, Wang Yangming was determined to look inside, so he pleaded repeatedly, assuring the monk that he would only take a quick look. Eventually, the monk had no choice but to reluctantly open the retreat cabin and let him in. Wang Yangming then entered the cabin. Sure enough, he saw a deceased old monk with a solemn expression sitting on a cushion. Strangely, the old monk bore a striking resemblance to Wang Yangming himself. When he looked up, he noticed a poem on the wall. 50 years later, here comes Wang Yangming. The one who opens the door is the one who closed it. After his soul departed, it returns again. Then he begins to believe in the indestructible body of Chan. It turned out that Wang Yangming was the old monk in his previous life. This is indeed what occurs in samsara. Some individuals are monks in this life, but will be householders in the next, and vice versa. The number of our births in the 6 realms is countless. Since Confucianism implies the continuity of lives, Confucians do not deny the existence of past and future lives. Taoism advocates for immortality. Although I have not read its canonical texts on rebirth, I believe such Taoist scriptures do exist. There are many empirical examples of rebirth in Taoism. For instance, Taoism proposes that the Yuan Shen or Yuan Sun is a person's spiritual body, which can exist independently of the physical body. Here is a story about a Taoist master named Li Tieguai. The legend states that Li Tieguai was originally named Li Xuan, who, through practice, attained a state in which his Yuan Shen could freely leave his physical body. One day, Li told his disciple Yangzi, "I am going to an appointment with the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. My Yuan Shen will depart, but my physical body will remain here. Please take care of my body. If after 7 days my Yuan Shen has not returned, then you may cremate my body. Please remember, it's 7 days." Then Li sat cross-legged. His Yuan Shen left the body and floated away. Yangzi followed his teacher's instructions and did not leave Li's body. On the 6th day, Yangzi's uncle arrived, telling him that his mother was seriously ill and wanted to see him one last time. Wailing bitterly, Yangzi pointed at Li's body and said, "My teacher's Yuan Shen is away, and he asked me to take good care of the body for 7 days. 6 days have passed. Who will watch over his body if I have to leave?" The uncle thought he was speaking nonsense, saying, "How can a person revive after being dead for 6 days?" He successfully persuaded Yangzi to cremate Li's body. On the 7th day, Li bid farewell to the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord, who presented Li with a verse that said, "Practice bigu, but don't avoid grains. The chariot is light and the road is familiar. You wish to return to your old body, but you unexpectedly come across a new one." Li did not understand the secret meaning of the verse. After returning to his cave, he noticed that his physical body was missing. Surprised, he set out to search for it, only to realize that it had been cremated. Li's Yuan Shen had no physical body to inhabit. Nearby, he found the corpse of a vagabond, so he instinctively placed his Yuan Shen into it. When he stood up and looked at his reflection in the river, he saw himself dressed in rags and using crutches. A handsome young man had been transformed into an unkempt Li Tieguai, lit Iron Crutch Li. In fact, Li's experience is reminiscent of the practice of forceful projection in the Tibetan traditions. When Rongjung Dorje, the third Karmapa, the emanation of Avalokiteshvara, passed into parinirvana, he intended to use forceful projection to find a new physical body, allowing him to continue his unfinished Dharma activities. Upon discovering the corpse of a 3-year-old boy who had just died, he immediately used forceful projection to transfer his mind stream into the recently deceased body and then rolled his eyes. Seeing this, the boy's mother was horrified, saying, "It is a bad omen for a dead person to be looking at the living." Then the mother blinded the boy by poking his eyes with a needle. The Karmapa believed that since he was blind, the boy would no longer be a human life endowed with the freedoms and advantages, making it difficult to benefit others. Therefore, he needed to adopt the method of reincarnation to be born again as a child of another family. Thus, a person's mind stream, or so-called soul, is continuous, and rebirth does exist. This is not a belief exclusive to Buddhism. Other religions, such as Catholicism and Christianity, also acknowledge the continuity of life, advocating that when a person dies, they will go to either heaven or hell. However, these religions do not elaborate on the underlying mechanisms as clearly and thoroughly as Buddhism does. They lack comprehensive analysis on issues such as the causes of rebirth, the possibility of attaining liberation, and more. Therefore, we Buddhists must understand the existence of past and future lives. Some intellectuals in particular may remain skeptical and develop various misconceptions if they do not resolve this issue. If one has solid evidence and reasoning to prove the existence of rebirth, one must accept it. For example, since childhood, a British man could always recall scenes of Petra, a historic city in southern Jordan, which existed more than 2,000 years ago. Later, using the memories of his past life, he was able to help archaeologists find many undiscovered sites. This is truly remarkable, and there are many similar cases of past life recollections. We must understand that people neither suddenly come into existence nor become nothingness after death. The reason many people think this way is that they have never studied the Dharma and do not comprehend the profound doctrines of Buddhism. Some members of the Sangha with higher education have told me that my teachings on Khenpo Tsultrim Lodro's The Truth of Life have greatly benefited them. This is particularly true for monastics who may feel reluctant to express doubts about rebirth in the presence of others. They may feel that, as monks or nuns, dressed in monastic robes and with shaven heads, they are expected to possess a deeper understanding of rebirth. In fact, some practitioners still have doubts about rebirth, and it's not easy for them to attain accomplishment if they simply put the issue on the back burner. Nevertheless, cultivating conviction in the existence of rebirth is crucial for our Dharma practice. If you do have doubts, you should consult and discuss them with a learned Dharma peer or master so that you can eventually develop a complete understanding and true conviction. Many people are completely ignorant about past and future lives. This is largely due to their lack of understanding of Buddhism. Otherwise, they would see that the teachings on this topic are rich and abundant. The so-called samsara is like a potter's wheel, a water wheel in a stream, or a bee trapped in a jar, continuously revolving without end. The sutra on the ocean-like concentration of the visualization of the Buddha uses the simile of a wheel of fire to describe samsara. Introduction to the Middle Way employs the simile of a watermill's wheel. Dhammapada, the treatise on the great perfection of wisdom, and the Sutra of Contemplation of the Mind ground in the Buddha's life use the simile of a chariot's wheel. The Sutra of the Collection of the Original Acts of the Buddha uses the simile of a fly trapped in a bamboo tube. When a bee is trapped inside a sealed jar, it can only fly around within that jar. Similarly, whether one is born into a higher realm or falls into a lower realm, they remain trapped within samsara. The upper part of the jar represents the celestial beings and humans of higher realms, while the lower space in the jar symbolizes the three lower realms. It is said in the treasury of Abhidharma that sentient beings in the six realms continuously cycle through existence as a result of their virtuous and non-virtuous actions, which is what we call samsara. Many practitioners never consider transcending samsara. They recite prayers and meditate every day, yet they neither abide in emptiness nor engage in practice with bodhicitta. Such practice is tainted by conceptual thoughts. For this reason, the practitioner will wander repeatedly in samsara, sometimes happy and sometimes miserable. The Lotus Sutra states, their desires are the cause whereby they fall into the three evil paths, revolving wheel-like through the six realms of existence and undergoing every sort of suffering and pain. This is the nature of samsara. The reason it is called samsara, or the cycle of conditioned existence, birth and death, is explained in Nagarjuna's precious garland with the simile of the wheel of a firebrand, which has no beginning, middle, or end. You will understand its cyclicality when studying the 12 links of dependent origination. Therefore, we must transcend samsara. It is just like this. Even if a prisoner is well-fed and well-clothed, they are still in a prison, hoping for liberation one day. Similarly, although we have food and clothing and our living conditions are improving, life's nature is still suffering, so each of us should aspire to attain liberation. Otherwise, we cannot be considered true practitioners. Since beginningless time, we have been drifting in this cyclical existence. All beings, without exception, have been each other's parents, friends, enemies, or ordinary individuals at some point. The Sutra of the Great Assembly states, "There is not a single living being who has not been my parent." The Brahma's Net Sutra states, "All men have been my fathers, and all women have been my mothers." There is substantial scriptural evidence from the Buddha's teachings. Schools of Tibetan Buddhism such as Kadampa, Gelug, and Nyingma all emphasize that all sentient beings have been our parents, and we should contemplate this in practices, including meditating on the defects of samsara and cultivating bodhicitta. This is not merely something specific to Buddhism or simply a folktale. Please ensure you develop a thorough understanding and conviction about rebirth. In sutras such as Jataka Stories of the Bodhisattva, Jataka Tales, and the Sutra of the Collection of the Six Perfections, the Buddha states that he used to be a Brahmin or a businessman in his causal stage. The Buddha is a truthful speaker who never lies. Since the Buddha has been reborn as beings with various identities in samsara, it follows that the same applies to us disciples. We may not know what we were in previous lives, but it is certain that samsara and rebirth exist. If we imagine molding all the earth into small balls the size of jujube seeds and counting as we say, this being's mother is this one, that being's mother is that one. Even when we run out of the earth balls, the number of times each being has been a mother to one another would still not be exhausted. This is stated in the sutras. As Nagarjuna says in Letter to a Friend, we would run out of earth trying to count our mothers with balls of clay the size of juniper berries. The Mahaparinirvana Sutra also discusses something similar. If possible, you should make time to read some sutras of Mahayana Buddhism and learn more about the similes and content. All sentient beings, from the beginningless past until now, have experienced rebirth in this manner without exception. During this time, countless heads and limbs have been severed due to greed and desire. If we were to gather all the limbs of those who have been reborn as small creatures like ants, they would surely surpass Mount Meru in height. Samyukta Agama, or the Connected Discourses of the Buddha, states The heap of bones one person leaves behind with the passing of a single aeon would form a heap as high as a mountain, so said the great sage. This is declared to be as massive as the tall Vepula mountain standing north of Vulture Peak in the Magadan mountain range. Beset by hunger and cold, with no food in their mouths and no clothing on their backs, the tears shed in anguish from the suffering of thirst and exposure, if collected before they dried up, would certainly far exceed all the waters of the oceans. Some female practitioners tend to cry easily, and many of them are aware that they have cried too much. If their tears were gathered together, they would at least fill up a bucket, if not a river or an ocean. Even the amount of molten copper and iron one has swallowed while in the hell realm would surpass the waters of the 4 great oceans combined. Therefore, none of us has anything to be arrogant about, no matter how knowledgeable, wealthy, or highly ranked you may be. Your arrogance will quickly diminish when you consider that you have experienced various forms of existence in previous lives. Even if you are a prominent political leader, if you do not believe in the law of karma and engage in harmful actions, you may find yourself reborn as a small insect in your next life, subject to being trampled by others. It is essential to reflect deeply on these profound principles. On the surface, they may seem simple, but it is crucial for a practitioner to develop a thorough understanding of them. If you are truly convinced, then whenever you contemplate the sufferings of samsara, you will undoubtedly feel a sense of fear. Arya Deva also says, if childish people ever perceive the suffering of cyclic existence, at that moment, both their mind and body would completely fail. If ordinary people were to perceive the sufferings of birth and death in samsara as a sublime being does, their minds and bodies would collapse upon witnessing these sufferings, as they cannot bear the truth. However, many of us not only struggle with the concept of throughout beginningless samsara until now, but we also find it difficult to accept the simple idea that after we die, we will experience either joy or pain in the next life as a result of our past actions. Non-Buddhists can be excused for not believing this, but it is a great pity if Buddhists lack the right view and understanding. Although this is the way things are, all beings still bound to samsara and unable to generate a fleeting desire to escape will inevitably suffer even more in the endless cycle of rebirth. Even if one relies on the slight merits derived from virtuous actions to attain a body like that of Brahma or Indra, characterized by long life, abundant wealth, grandeur, and striking appearance, one ultimately cannot escape death. After death, one will still have to endure the tragic suffering of the lower realms. Thus, those who temporarily possess insignificant comforts like wealth, health, and happiness will, within a few years, months, or even just a few days, find themselves destitute and pitiable, or, unwillingly, must experience the unbearable pain of the lower realms as the fruits of their good karma are exhausted. If we deeply contemplate the unbearable sufferings in samsara, we will suddenly realize, oh, so the objects to which people cling so greedily are nothing more than this. Temporary happiness and joy at present are akin to suddenly waking from a dream during a time of prosperity. What is the meaning in this happiness and joy? In Finding Rest in the Nature of the Mind, it states, those who in this present life have high and pleasing status, wealth untold, but dying, they must suffer helpless poverty and be the slaves of slaves. Their wealth was but a dream and vanished when they woke. Even if we become billionaires or the most famous people in this life, once our 5 aggregates dissolve and we must leave this world, do we retain our wealth and fame? Of course not. As stated in the Precious Treasury of Pith Instructions, remember that your body, wealth, family, friends, and experiences in this life will all be left behind as you go forth alone with no one to accompany you. It is time to seek a refuge and protector to be with you then. When I am both physically and mentally relaxed, I often reflect on these truths repeatedly and remind myself, every day I cling to so many things. However, when I die, only the virtuous deeds I have done will be of any assistance. Both good and bad karma will closely follow me. The unceasing cycles of birth and death in samsara are truly terrifying. Many people go through life without contemplating the nature of samsara and instead indulge in meaningless distractions day after day. But if they truly reflect on it, it becomes clear that they are like yaks in the slaughterhouse, unaware of the imminent death and still clinging to temporary happiness within the pen. This clinging results in an indefinite delay of their liberation. As stated in the Sutra of Contemplation of the Mind Ground in the Buddha's life, sentient beings are trapped in the ocean of birth and death, cycling through the 5 realms with no escape in sight. Therefore, while we have this precious human life and have encountered the supreme dharma of liberation, we should seize the opportunity firmly, like a blind man grasping an elephant's tail. We should make a heartfelt aspiration. From now on, I will pursue liberation wholeheartedly, so I will not get entrapped in samsara anymore. Otherwise, it would be too frightening. You should have such an aspiration. Those who seem happy and joyful at the moment due to a bit of good karma will, once that karma is exhausted, have no moment to linger. Even the kings of the gods, seated on their splendid thrones and indulging in sensual pleasures and boundless joys, will, at the end of their lifespan, in the blink of an eye, fall headfirst into hell and experience suffering on the blazing iron ground. The Sutra of the Right Mindfulness of Dharma says, when celestial beings are about to exhaust their lifespan, great distress arises in their minds. The myriad sufferings endured by hell beings are not even 1/16 of theirs. Even the gods of the sun and moon, who can illuminate all 4 continents of the world, will eventually experience rebirth in a place so dark that one cannot see their own hand. Beings who now inhabit the depths of the ocean or the heights of mountains must have once been celestial beings, radiating brilliance in their previous lives. According to some of the Buddha's teachings, those who slander the Dharma, destroy Buddhist scriptures, and obstruct the teachings will be reborn in particularly dark and dreadful places in their next lives. As you can see, the apparent happiness in samsara is unreliable and cannot be trusted. We should all acknowledge that the 6 realms of samsara do exist. Although at the ultimate level, nothing exists inherently, at the relative level, everything exists without deception. Just as we cannot directly see Canada and America at this moment, it does not mean these 2 countries do not exist. Similarly, although we cannot directly see the realms of hungry ghosts, hells, heavens, form realms, and formless realms with our naked eyes, much evidence supports their existence. The seemingly plausible pleasures of samsara are fundamentally unreliable. We must resolve to dedicate ourselves fully in this very life to escaping the vast ocean of suffering in samsara and attaining the ultimate, lasting bliss of perfect Buddhahood. And many of you have been here for years, seemingly practicing the Dharma day and night. But have you ever asked yourself this question? Am I truly pursuing liberation? Some lay practitioners have been studying the Dharma for over 20 years, but have you checked whether it is for the purpose of liberation? This is a very important question, and everyone should reflect on it. Of course, it is not enough to merely talk about these concepts. We must contemplate the corresponding teachings carefully. When practicing the defects of samsara, as suggested in a guide to the words of my perfect teacher, you should use the proper methods for the beginning, the main part, and the conclusion of the practice. To summarize, we should understand, first, that the 6 realms in samsara do exist. Second, that we must be liberated from these 6 realms. These are the 2 points I have addressed in today's teaching. If you have doubts about them, you should engage in discussion and debate during your hearing and contemplation. If you do not have doubts and truly believe that samsara exists and there is no pleasure in it, so I must attain liberation. Practicing with this mindset holds great power. It will quickly sever your attachment to both this life and future lives. Otherwise, if we cling to wealth and fame in this life, or to a better rebirth in the next, any dharma practice we undertake will yield no success. Therefore, I hope you will diligently apply these teachings in practice so that true renunciation will soon arise in your mind.